Dr. Leila Farsakh is a professor of political science at the University of Massachussetts, Boston. She is also a member of the Journal of Palestine Studies editorial committee. Thank you for watching Palestine Studies TV. I'm your host, Will Yeomans. In this episode, we'll be chatting with Dr. Leila Farsakh about the Arab uprisings and their impact on Palestinian politics. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Farsakh. My first question for you is, what are the implications for the revolutions that are taking place in Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Bahrain, and elsewhere for the Arab-Israeli conflict?
Well, I think it has very serious implications, and it has implications both on the short term and on the long term. On the short term, I think what's going to happen is that we're going to see an attempt to resuscitate the peace process, and we've seen that with the latest Netanyahu initiative of trying to take over the initiative of the peace process and say that they have an initiative, the Israelis have an initiative that they want to launch in May, and which seemed to entail a unilateral declaration of the Palestinian state with temporary borders and security arrangements. And at the same time, we're having now a certain hiatus of activity, which has been going since a while, but now is being further activated, with the PA trying to move ahead with the unilateral declaration of the state in September, and the quartet actually thinking about it. And I think the Netanyahu initiative is an attempt to pull the rug from under the quartet and not be faced with being cornered about having to accept something they don't want. So on the short term, there's going to be an attempt to let's now try and resolve it in a two-state solution, because that's the only time we have, and Israel should dictate how it should be, and let's call it a state, while in fact, as we know, it's not going to be a state, it's going to be a Bantustan that has an international recognition. And that's a very risky thing. But whether it will succeed in the short term, I doubt, because I think the Israelis do not want a viable two-state solution, as we know. And I think also the Palestinian negotiator now, especially after the WikiLeaks, are cornered in a very tricky situation by which they have to show that they are not actually going to give up on the right of return and Jerusalem, which, although they already, Abbas said, will have to make some compromises on that, I think the legitimacy of the PA is very much in question. So this comes then to the medium and long-term implications of the revolts in the Middle East that have took place in Tunisia, Egypt, and now also in Libya. But I will try to focus on the positive implications of the Tunisian and Egyptian Arab revolt. I think what they will show is two things: that the leaderships, all Arab leadership, including the Palestinian leadership, is delegitimized. It has been delegitimized since a while, first with the split with Hamas, but also more recently now with the WikiLeaks, with the Ariqat resigning. So I think what's going to happen is the pressure on the leadership will increase in the PA. And I think also what's very important about these revolts is that they accentuated and revealed that what's very important is not the state and the struggle for a state, but what is very important is the struggle for rights. So I think the very important implication of these revolts is that they've shown the ability of a young generation to take their destiny in their hand and to create a new form of nationalism. We are Arabs, there's an emphasis on us being Arabs, emphasis on us being Tunisian and Moroccan, but above all, Arab with dignity, wanting dignity and wanting rights. And I think this shift from wanting a state for the sake of a state versus a state which is responsible for its citizen is very important, and it's going to give strength to the civil rights and the civil society movement in Palestine, who are reaffirming the centrality of Palestinian rights and how far the PA has to defend these rights and forget about the state. So I think this shift is very important. It's going to strengthen the call for the boycott. It's going to strengthen all the call for the right of return. But I hope it's also going to strengthen the fact that two-state solution is dead and should not be campaigned for.
I'm wondering in what way these developments, the uprisings and the revolutions, could impact the relationship between Fatah and Hamas. Is conflict or disunity going to be the way?
I think something is very important happening now, both short-term and long-term. I think in the short-term what's happening is Hamas is trying to defend Palestinian rights and calling for unity and wanting to hold on to Palestinians, that they are the real representative of Palestinian claims and rights. But at the same time, Mash'al, we heard them from Syria saying that they're seriously working on reconciling with Fatah and important to unite the Palestinian front. I think Fatah will have at one point to do something with that. I don't know how far it really wants to. But what I'm much more concerned with is, as you know, also Hamas has been discredited in Gaza. And the real issue is not what this present leadership would do, but rather where is the new leadership and at what time it will really take over Hamas and Fatah. Because there has been discussion in Fatah for a long time, and also within Hamas people, like in the Muslim Brothers in Egypt. The younger generation saying we need to deal with the conflict differently, we don't want this split, and Palestinian rights are supersede, and unity supersede any division we could have. So the tricky question is, at what point will the new generation take over the leadership? And it is boiling. I suspect between here and the end of the year, something is going to happen in the West Bank. And I do expect that the unity between Hamas and Fatah is bound to happen at one point. Some reform of reconciliation is going to happen. Because also people are very scared that now what's happening in the region is going to make the Palestinian-Israeli conflict a back burner. I suspect, for example, what's going to happen, Syria and Israel would try to reopen negotiations. But I don't think it's a bad idea if it goes in the back burner. I don't think it ever can go into the back burner. But the Palestinian cause and the resolution of the Palestinian problem has always been tied to the nature of Arab politics. The reason why the peace process dragged for so much is because Egypt under Mubarak accepted to play the regional ally of Israel vis-à-vis Iran. The reason why we didn't have a resolution is because we had authoritarian regimes stuck very much on the ocean of stability. I think all this has been shaken now. And the real question is how you're going, again, to re-emphasize the issue of rights in a way that can be negotiable. Don't forget, it's not just a question. I mean, I suspect that the claim and the talk for a binational state are going to increase. How you're going to cash it, I don't know. But we might go into a situation whereby we're still going to be in an interim process for a while a new leadership comes up and redefines the struggle in terms of a struggle for a secular democratic state, not for just a Palestinian state on part of Palestine.
In your opinion, what are some of the lessons that Palestinian civil society activists and others working within Palestine, what are the lessons that they could draw from what they've seen throughout the Arab world?
The importance of civil disobedience and the importance of civil resistance. But don't forget, the Palestinians have been doing it a lot. They've been doing it in Bil'ain, they've been doing it against the apartheid wall, they've been doing it for the past 5 years. We haven't had any suicide bombers. In a sense, I do feel that Tunisia and Egypt have been inspired by the Palestinians' latest step towards civil disobedience and towards civil resistance. So I think it's going to be a cross-fertilization process, if you want. It's only going to strengthen all the movement happening in the West Bank today, and also in Gaza to some extent, a resistance movement based on civil resistance and civil disobedience, the campaign against the wall, weekly demonstration in Bil'ain. The real issue will be at what point people will just decide to do a la Luther King, just go and cross a checkpoint. That would be something very beautiful to see if at one point the Palestinians could organize themselves in such a way whereby they just say, we want a secular democratic state, and they organize and just go and smash the wall. But, we still wait to see. But I think all this is going to strengthen also the importance of dialogue, the importance of generational debate, all things that have been in the air and have been practiced in Palestine for a while, but now they're going to even be given a larger impetus. And I think that's going to be very positive in the long run. But we also have to wait and see how Israel will act. Israel is not very pleased with anything. I mean, Netanyahu's initiative came on the backdrop of a fear of a rise of call for a binational state. So we should not forget that. We still have the security apparatuses in Hamas as well as West Bank. How far would they really tip? I suspect at one point they will tip. But we still do not know when this point is coming. The real point is, when is the new generation going to take over the decision process? I think it's going to happen, but we don't know yet when.
To what extent have the protesters throughout the Arab world been inspired by Palestinians, or what are the kind of linkages that you know about?
I think there has been some inspiration by it. I think, people are watching. I mean, I think there has been some inspiration by it. Don't forget, Palestine has always been an instigator for mass demonstration in the whole Arab world. I think what was very important in this revolt, and I thought it was well thought, whether in Tunisia and in Egypt. If you notice, they never, put up Palestinian flags. They never talked about Israel, never talked about Palestine. I think that was very intelligent and very important on their behalf. They talked about nationalism and they emphasized being Arabs. The whole message was we're Arabs, we're Christians and Muslims. I think that was very intelligent on their behalf. It just shows the importance of social networks, but also the importance of different political parties joining in these youth which started or instigated the revolts. I think, don't forget, in each country the presence of trade unions, like in Tunisia, or the presence of the Muslim Brothers was very important. But in both cases, it is the younger Muslim Brothers that played an important role. And I think this is going to have also impact on Palestine. And I also think there's something that happened in the revolt in Egypt, which, not maybe many people noticed it, but I noticed it and I thought it was very revealing. In the Jum'at al-Ghadab, the Jum'at al-Rahil, the Friday of departure in Egypt, if you remember, the Sheikh who led the prayer, the Friday prayer in Tahrir Square, out of all the khutbahs that he could say, he chose the one about Moses challenging the pharaohs and how the pharaohs had to go. And I thought that was so symbolic and so beautiful in one way, because it's sending a message that also the Jews are part of the Arab world. And there is a place for us to live, Muslim, Christians, and Jews together. Zionism has no place, but Israel's immunity also has to stop. And the real question is, how can you start working for a binational state, both at a grassroots level as well as at the political level? But I think it's still early to work at the political level. It's very important, and it's already happening, working at the grassroots level, also at the intellectual level. But we have to wait and see, because it could also go into Libya. I think we're not going to go into a Libya situation for the simple fact that we already had it. And in 2007, we had the split between Gaza and the West Bank. Worse than that, it cannot get. So, but it's going to be tough, because getting rid of old generation is hard. And also it's tough because this generation, or however we think of it, gave its dues. And I think it's very important to remember that Saeb Ariqat and Abbas and all these guys are not traitors. They are people who grew up with the biggest challenge of how are we going to put the Palestinian issue on the map. In the 1970s, the Palestinians were a bunch of terrorists. In the 1980s, we were really lost after Beirut. And that whole generational struggle was, how are we going to put Palestine on the map, and how are we going to get our land back? And the two-state solution was the only option in town. And I think they did their best. But it's Israel who made that solution completely fail. And I think after 20 years of peace process, we realized that the two-state solution has been buried with the effect of settlements in Israeli policy. And at the same time, the Palestinians are not giving up their rights. So we're only left with the one-state solution. And what happened in Tunisia and Egypt with the promise of a new citizenship, it's all a debate. This revolution is a revolution about what is it to be a citizen in the Arab world, and about the right of everybody to dignity, national dignity as well as individual dignity, the question of respect of the law, of equality. And I think this new concept of citizenship is also going to have its effect on Palestine, and it can only enforce it. So let's hope the forces against it will not be much stronger than the forces pushing for it.
Thank you very much for appearing on Palestine Studies TV. We really appreciated having you on.
Thank you, and have a very good day.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.